Hello, welcome. I am Matt Baldacci, publisher of Shelf Awareness, and I'm delighted that you've joined us for our new webinar series, Shelf Awareness Presents. That's one mistake, Jess. The idea of Shelf Awareness Presents webinars is to invite experienced and knowledgeable booksellers to a conversation about a particular topic that will help other booksellers learn some tools, tricks, and best practices. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Kelly Justice of Fountain Books in Richmond, Virginia, and Catherine Weller of Weller Bookworks in Salt Lake City, Utah. We're going to discuss timely topics, selling to everyone in an increasingly polarized world. Later, we will hear from three authors. Familius will introduce you to Melissa Dalton Bradford, author of How to Save Democracy. From Broadleaf Books, you will get to meet Darren Johnson, author of Digital Coup, and Beaming Books is in conversation with Nazanin Aganji Ford and her book, My America Blooms. Broadleaf and Beaming are both part of Augsburg Fortress Publishers. Before we get going, a few words about the tools. The chat is open, and we invite you to use that to ask questions. The Q&A is open as well, and you may use that. And also a note that, of course, this Zoom is a safe space. Please be kind and considerate. Civil commentary is welcome, but anyone engaging in aggressive or bullying behavior will be removed. And with that, let's get going. Catherine and Kelly, will you please turn on your cameras and microphones? All right. So, just as a way to begin, you guys, could you each describe you and your store briefly? And Kelly, we'll start with you.
Sure. My name is Kelly Justice, and I own Fountain Bookstore in Richmond, Virginia. I've been an independent bookseller since 1989. I came to Fountain in 2000 and bought it in 2008. We are located in a downtown historic district, very near the Capitol, and in the center of the business district. And we are event-centric. We work with about 150 authors a year. We do 80 some book clubs a year and also a number of other different kinds of events. So we are event centric. And yeah, I think that's that. Oh, and
Yeah, thank
Richmond is
you.
about 1.2 million in the metro area.
Oh, we didn't talk about that. Now Catherine's going to come up with a Salt Lake City audience. Sorry, Catherine, but you're up.
Have no population stats. My name is Catherine Weller. I work with Weller Bookworks in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm a co-owner and a new books buyer. I've done this for somewhere between, I think I'm coming up on 35 years selling books. Our business has been in business since 1929. Weller sells new, used, and rare books. We are a general interest bookstore. So we span the field of topics. We do much better with nonfiction than fiction. We are not events driven. We're as curatorial with our events. In fact, more curatorial with our events than we are with our inventory for a variety of reasons. Salt Lake City proper, where we are, which is in the what's considered the downtown area, is not what most people think of when they think of Utah. It's very progressive. It's certainly left-leaning. We are, however, surrounded by parts of the county and then, of course, the rest of the state, which is much more conservative. Like I said, I've got no population stats.
That's okay.
I'm
Well,
not
just
that
think of
well
you as
prepared.
a little blue island.
I didn't bring up our politics. We're about the downtown Richmond's about it's pretty purple.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's germane to what we want to talk about today. But we're going to kind of ease into this idea of selling books in a polarized world, because one of the things that happens oftentimes with big, timely titles is they're dropped in by the publisher. They don't come up in a normal selling cycle. It's sort of a surprise to booksellers. We actually have one in our presentation today. And recently, Pope Leo had a book dropped in. And what I wanted to ask you is, can you each say what best practices are for a publisher who wants to drop in a title? Like, what do they need to give you? And in what advice, and this is actually an important thing, it's a lot, but what advice would you give a fellow bookseller who is faced with a buying decision on one of the big book club picks, without knowing anything about the book. So Catherine, what's your best practices for a publisher who wants to drop in a title?
All right. So it sounds like we're talking about blind drop-ins where we've basically got nothing other than a novel written, it's a novel and it's going with an A-level book club. So my first piece of advice would be find out what the A-level book clubs are and the B-level book clubs because they
Mm.
will say that much. And watch your track over time because we have found that some book clubs work better for us than others. Some of us, nothing touches it all. There are times when you can kind of tease out a little bit about a subject. I will, after the announcement, go look at Edelweiss, go look at iPage, just in case there's just a little nugget of information there. Sometimes there's a BISAC category applied that helps me out a bit further. Um, I
I
also
remember
look
a
at print
long,
runs.
long time ago, um, there was an Ursula Hagey book picked for the Oprah Book Club, and it was a long time ago, right? And the reps, the Simon Schuster reps, couldn't say anything about it, but the Illinois rep was saying, "Well, I can't tell you what book it is, but there's a dwarf." It was enough.
Exactly. And that's the other thing. Find out. Talk to your rep. Can they tell you anything about it? Can they tell you an editor? Sometimes that tells you a lot. Can they
Yeah.
tell you the print run?
Now, Kelly, you had an interesting thought about like with these, let's call them A-level book clubs. And I'm not entirely certain what each of you would consider it, but with these A-level, but you don't know anything about the book. You had an interesting concept about how to buy them. What's your concept on buying those books?
Oh, we had this discussion last week. I have no idea what I said. So, I think the publisher's going to expect as much as they give, and if the less information we get, the less that they can expect. What did I say? And remind me.
Well, I think what you said is like, look, if it's a totally blind book, I'm going to buy one or two and we'll go from
Exactly. It
there.
is. It is.
Yeah.
It's one or two. And I mean, also, Catherine, you mentioned last week, I do remember this. I remember what you said. That checking the imprint often will give you an idea if it's nonfiction. But we were mainly talking about book club books here. But I would honestly, and I'm a very aggressive buyer, in general, but this is one of the areas where I'm quite conservative. So ones and
Yeah.
twos. Um, because if and especially if you can see that the print run is going to be is massive, it'll be in Target, it'll be at all the mass merchandisers, and it may just not be an independent bookstore book.
Okay. Now what about a big nonfiction title that a
Hmm.
publisher is dropping in where they're not hiding what it is?
Hmm.
What's the most important thing for those publishers to do? And as a bookseller, what are you looking for so that you can adjust to this kind of like it's suddenly coming? Like, does it affect your open to buys? What do you do? Oh, sorry, Kelly, you go first.
Okay. Um, Again, I mean, I rely very heavily on our sales reps to talk to us about previous. If they would do us the courtesy of putting in comp titles, that is incredibly helpful to have the comp titles and Edelweiss already there. I do ask the rep just point blank, is this something that you feel is representative of our community as you understand it and our buys in the past? But if they say I can't say, then I say I can't buy. I mean, that's the end of the
Yeah.
you
All
know.
right. Now I'm going to push forward a little bit, and Catherine, I
Mhm.
want to change this slightly, but how do you handle selling big popular titles that don't fit the particular curation of your store? Because I think independent stores are faced with that. And I'm Kelly, I'm going to throw that to you too, but Catherine, you go first.
I don't buy them.
Yeah.
I don't have money for things that I can't sell. So to have it just to put on a bestseller rack, that's not a sufficient reason for me. We just ignore its presence on the bestsellers list. It's a special order situation. Happy to do that, but yeah, I'm not going to buy it.
Kelly?
Yeah, I'm afraid that this is a quite a short answer. The answer is, no. If
Pass.
it doesn't fit, then we don't. Again, limited budgets, classifying myself as an aggressive buyer. I spend I buy all the adult books. I spend our money on debuts. I spend our money on because that's the growth in the industry, and that's where I'm willing to take a chance. I
Yeah.
spend our money on titles that publishers have put some skin in the game. If they put some co-op dollars on that and make me look at it twice, I'm like, okay, you're willing you're pushing this for me. I will take a second look at that. I talk to my staff. I think about making big stacks of things that represent the values of our community and our store. But yes, it's just I won't even buy one to fill that slot because
Okay.
a lot of these titles are on for 1 or 2 weeks as well. So it just and then they fall right off. So
Okay. Now, if you think about titles that you do want to bring in that maybe appeal to one side of the polarized audience or not, Kelly, you mentioned staff, and I want to ask about
mm.
this. Have you had to manage, Kelly, your employees' beliefs and opinions when creating the profile and character of your store? How have you done that?
um I think about this a lot. At the moment, all of my staff are Southerners. We're all born and raised in the South,
Hmm.
and the South, and so we're used to dealing with uh, polarized viewpoints within our own families, within
Yeah.
around the Thanksgiving table, in our community, in our store. It's not these kinds of living peacefully together. Uh, are day-to-day occurrences for us. The South is not a monolith, that we are incredibly varied. And I think also the sensitivity of the fact that a lot of people see the South as a monolith mean that uh, we tend, at least my staff tends to be a little bit more on the live and let live um,
Okay.
way
How
of
big is your
seeing
staff?
things. We have 4.75 FTEs, which is roughly six people, six people, a
Yeah.
couple of floaters. So uh, but it doesn't necessarily reflect itself in our inventory. Our inventory tends to be pretty progressive. Our staff is very progressive, including myself. Um, we do occasionally we'll occasionally take a title out that we find doesn't reflect our values. Maybe we find out later. It gets brought up to me, and I'm like, well, let me look at it, and we'll have a discussion about it.
Oh,
Um,
so that's interesting. So since you're the buyer, you've bought the book, you chose to bring it in the store. But if your
mhm.
staff comes to you and says like, "Hey, why are we carrying this?"
I
You'll,
might not know. I might genuinely not know.
yeah, okay,
And then current events happen, and I'm really not a big fan of cancel culture, but there are some places that we don't want the store to be reflecting
yeah.
certain opinions,
It's the
or
beauty of an
or
indie
making
bookstore.
money for people that are we feel are doing harm. So
Yeah, and I think this is important for like maybe new booksellers to understand. Like you choose that. Like
yeah.
that is the character of your store, and you're successful because you choose to have a strong identity.
Yeah, and I do want to bring up something very specific about this uh that it's not just coming that I think there's a misconception that it's just coming from a conservative viewpoint saying you should be
Right?
carrying this book, and it's not. That those conversations I handle very quickly with, oh, well, are you a capitalist? Do you believe that small business owners should be able to make their own decisions? Do you want to buy the book? You don't? Well, then I can't carry it, can I? I mean, it's not an economically viable decision for us. And on the other side, if somebody says you should be carrying this book, and I say, well, we don't carry that book. Did you want to buy one? And they say no. And I say, well, we can't stay in business and be here for you if we carry books that we can't sell simply on principle. So, I mean, it's the same argument, honestly. Uh, but what new bookstore owners or even seasoned ones You don't have to justify your decisions. I thought a lot about whether or not I was going to come on this panel. These are not things that I like to talk about. I consider
Right.
these
And
to
I
be
appreciate that.
private decisions, and but they are your decisions. And as a business owners, if you're not answering to a board, and I thought it was important to say something that to just please remember that not be disempowered by other people's opinions.
That's so important. Thank you. So Catherine, I'm going to come back to you now, and you can answer that question however you want. But the sense of what Kelly was getting at, I'm kind of curious if you have the same situation, in your little blue island.
In our little blue island.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got in the sense that yes, we are accustomed to having to have difficult conversations with people, our friends and family. That's not new to us either. Because my staff is my staff was insulted when we were called once a good store for angry liberals because they don't believe they're liberals. They're to the left of that. So we all have those conversations, and most of them are pretty good about it. I do tell my staff that if there are questions about stalking, if something gets difficult, if something gets heated, I don't pay them to be abused. That's not why they're there. I pay them for their knowledge. So they need to call me or one of the other managers, and we will talk with them about the buying decisions because really we're the ones that should take that flack. At the same
Yeah.
time, I do value my staff's opinions. So they suggest things for me to buy and bring in all the time. That there are people who are deeply, deeply into certain kinds of politics that will give me lists of books to consider. And, we'll talk about those. Um, Customers coming in, we don't get the complaints we used to have
Hmm.
to the degree that we used to, because I think people have largely given up on thinking of us as a conservative or an LDS store. We were never that store, but we walked a line back in the day that we don't walk anymore. We do have complaints periodically that I deal with, and my staff and I have conversations sometimes about things. It's our biggest one recently was when somebody special ordered Mein Kampf, and the staff was deeply, deeply, deeply uncomfortable with this. And I've watched enough enough difficult discussions from both the left and the right as to what we should or should not carry. There's like I said, we can't really make assumptions about why somebody wants a book. We've got to, if they're paying for it and they're special ordering it, I can have a conversation with them. And there is one book in particular where my co-owner will have a conversation with someone every time, but we don't know what's going on. We can't jump to a conclusion there. And it turns out this particular customer was actually ordering it from us and getting a couple of other books because he was writing a semester paper on the rise of totalitarianism. He wanted to use it as a source. He wanted a physical copy and he couldn't find one anywhere. Um, we're the store, because we're a nonfiction store, we're the store that should enable that kind of discussion and questioning. So that was a moment for us all to
That's
pause and
that's amazing.
reflect.
Is everybody else's heart beating a little faster? Because I'm like the concept of booksellers being on the front line, like you're bringing that up, and that's so. Kelly said she thought hard about joining this panel, and I said I appreciate, but I really appreciate both of you taking this on. It's not easy to talk about, but I think today it's really important to be able to talk about everything without getting heated, without getting angry, without letting fear get in the way. Um, it's part of the reason we love independent booksellers. Go, Kelly.
You can take and do this is just something very particular that my staff bonded over, and this is a do not try this at home thing unless you're crazy, and I'm a little crazy. Um, we had a guy standing out on the street, like covered with mace, like mace in every pocket, and he was
Oh,
holding up a horrible sign that was condemning every queer person to hell, and talking about grooming and various things like that. And I just got very, and this happens in my neighborhood. And I just got very not on my block, man. Not on my block. And so I came into work and I was all hot, and I looked at my staff and I said, I want a stack of $100 worth net of books for queer kids in my hands in 15 minutes. And they went to the stacks and they're like, what is wrong with you? And I was like, I don't, just please just do this. And I said, ring them out free of charge. I walked them down the street and Andy said, what are you doing? As my general manager, Andrea Richardson, she said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm going to take these down the street and I'm going to show this stack of books to this man. And I don't know what I'm going to do after that happens. And so I walked down the street and I held it up to him and I said, sir, what is your name? And he told me his name. I don't remember it. I was shaking like a leaf. And I said, I'm donating these books in your name to a local queer youth group. And I just wanted to thank you for inspiring me to do my job today. And he said, have a good day. And I said, you do the same.
wow.
And and you know,
Yes. Yeah,
I mean,
Kelly,
don't do
amazing.
that. I mean, I could have gotten
Don't try
shot.
this at
This is an
home.
open carry state. So, but there are days when you have to, and you do it in your displays, and you do it in your events, and you do it in your um, activism, and it's just you know. He hasn't been back. So that's
Well,
sorry.
my gosh,
Yeah.
that's amazing. We have unfortunately run out of time, but that's quite a note to close it on. Um, I said it before, but I reiterated. I'm so grateful that both of you were willing to do this with us. So thank you very much. Uh, I give you a chance. Is there anything else you guys want to say? I don't want to completely cut you off.
I do have stuff to say about the nonfiction growth.
Okay, so I
So
had
I'll
sent.
stick around, we can stick around.
Yeah, I want to talk about this. I had sent Kelly and Catherine a question. So, Catherine, I'm gonna go to you first, but the question goes like this, and I had intended this to be kind of like a lighter exit from this conversation, but there's a strong opinion on the publishing side of the business that nonfiction is a tough sell right now. I mean, do you agree with that? Do you see hope for a nonfiction rebound in the near future? I'm sure our nonfiction writing guest authors and publishers have just pricked up their ears. So, Catherine, what's your stance? And then we'll go over to Kelly to talk about nonfiction.
I don't agree with it, just flat out. I led with we're a primarily nonfiction store. So maybe that is part of our curation, but we're selling history, certain political things like crazy, current affairs. Yes.
Great.
Nonfiction is so huge, right? How
Yeah.
can all of it not be
I
viable?
agree. There have been
There's always
reports in the
something.
press from senior executives saying, nonfiction is not selling, so we're not buying nonfiction to publish, et cetera. And I completely disagree. So thank you. And Kelly, we'll end it
I
with
have
you.
very short thoughts on this. I went and pulled some data, and our data is almost it tracks almost exactly with Publishers Weekly's reports last week. Our growth of nonfiction in last year has been 21%. We're having a growth
Nice.
year, and it's 21%, but our growth of fiction was 65%. And our turns are roughly double for fiction than they are for nonfiction. So, those are our numbers. But what I hope is that these numbers are not keeping publishers from publishing great books, and it doesn't keep us from being there for them to get those books into the hands that need them.
Yeah, maybe this small pebble into the pond will make a ripple that some people listen to, because it's important.
Mhm.
Okay. We're going to end it there, but thank you so much, you guys. Jess, I'm going to ask you to switch to speaker view, please, if you would. And we're going to move on. There's been some questions in the chat about a recording. Yes, this session is being recorded, and you will all be sent a link to the recording as well. But now, for now, we're going to turn to meeting some really interesting authors. First up are Erica Sargent from Familius, along with Melissa Dalton Bradford, author of How to Save a Democracy. And Erica, if you will just give me a second so I can pull your PowerPoint up, we'll be ready to go.
Perfect. I'll start with my introduction. I am Erica Sargent. I'm the Director of Marketing and PR for Familius. Familius is an independent publishing house. We just celebrated our 14th birthday in January, so we're officially in our teen years. And we help families be happy. We publish children's books, gift books, parenting titles, cookbooks, self-help, and they're all focused on families. So publishing a book called How to Save Democracy might seem like a sharp turn away from our usual genres and subject matter that we publish. But that's because we believe there is no greater threat to families in all their many shapes and forms than the loss of their voice. So government decisions very much affect families. And this book, How to Save Democracy, helps individuals make a difference. There are things everyday citizens can do to shape democracy, and this book not only educates, it also empowers citizens to take action. And we're not alone in this belief. As you can see on this slide, How to Save Democracy has already received a cover endorsement from Katie Couric, and she calls it an indispensable blueprint for understanding what's at stake and the concrete action every citizen who cares about democracy can take. Next slide. And this book is written by Melissa Dalton Bradford, who you'll get to hear from in a minute. So Melissa is an educator, public speaker, and co-founder of two nonprofits. Drawing on global parenting and refugee outreach, she provides a unique international perspective on the threats facing democracy today. Her work connects history with current events to help people understand that democracies, they fail, and crucially, more importantly, they can be rebuilt. So I will turn it over to Melissa. She can start with what we are facing. And I have a question for you, Melissa. So we know that
Yes.
we know that there's growing fear and frustration among citizens. I mean, I'm sure all the booksellers here, both from the reader perspective as well as the books they're seeing coming down the line onto their shelves. There's growing fear and frustration among citizens, not just in the US, but worldwide, with democratic governments and elected leaders. So what are we really facing, Melissa?
What we are seeing is the repeat of an authoritarian playbook. And as someone who has surveyed history and has lived in 9 different countries over 35 years, I've actually watched as a witness up close how democracies democratically elected leaders can slide into authoritarian tactics. And they don't know that they're following a playbook, but they are. And those who track the demise of democracy worldwide can identify these hallmarks. And so we are watching not just chaos and confusion and erosion, we're watching the repeat or the rhyme of historic norms. And we have the book. We've seen the conclusion of the book. My area of expertise is the interwar years because I've spent 15, 16 years in Germany. My graduate work is in the interwar years. Those are the years that led up to World War II. And I'm living in Germany and I'm watching the very processes that overtook the democracy of that age repeat in my homeland. So we aren't watching something that is a complete novelty. We're watching a repeat, but it's sped up in a very sophisticated way because we aren't in the 20th century anymore, are we? We're in the 21st century. So it's digitized, there's AI, there's a global network that is actively pursuing the dismantling of democracy worldwide.
Perfect. Okay, next slide, please. And we're going to tap into these hallmarks. You mentioned in your research that you've seen common denominators, both past and present in governments. So if you can go to the next slide, one more. And we'll have Melissa touch on, what are the common denominators that you see between the past and present leadership?
Thanks, Erica. So, what I do in the book is I take these 11 hallmarks, and if you talk with different democratic watchdogs or scholars, if you were talking with the academy, everyone would have a different kind of list, but there's always a core list that we recognize as common to this trend. And so I've narrowed it to 11, and I use 11 chapters to give my reader, who is not necessarily a member of the academy, this is written specifically for the reader on the street, because democracy belongs in the streets, not just in the academy and not just in the White House. And so we go through 11 different kinds of these tactics or hallmarks, as I call them. And each hallmark is illustrated with 3 case studies. I'll give you an example. And we're going to go to this in just a couple of slides. Here are we're going through what these different hallmarks might be. I saw them or I know them from my studies in Germany. We've seen them in Venezuela, Brazil, Poland, Russia, obviously Hungary, Turkey, Chile, Argentina, India even. And I used 2 countries to illustrate for my reader what it looked like or what it currently looks like when this hallmark takes place. The 3rd case study that I introduce to my readers in every single one of these chapters is the US, because the US now is demonstrating a full-blown technicolor stereophonic representation of these hallmarks, all 11 of them. So if we go to the next slide, we narrowed this down because we don't have enough time, but we narrowed it down to what I think are maybe 3 representative hallmarks. And I start with assaulting truth. A shared idea that truth is that it even exists, and that some of it is knowable, is a foundational principle of democracy. And what authoritarians do is that they erode public trust by flooding the zone with lies. They lie flagrantly, or they misrepresent, or they obfuscate, or they use euphemisms. They create alternative realities where truth is a function of power. What is also important in each of these hallmark chapters, and what I hope distinguishes this book from others and makes it a field guide, is that at the end of each of these hallmarks, at the end of each of the case studies within the hallmarks, I offer my readers a visually offset action plan. So they have seen what other countries have done to combat this assault on truth, for instance, and then I modernize it or I localize it for them wherever they might be. Here are some tips. Curate your inputs immediately. Sometimes we are unknowing or naive, unwitting purveyors of untruth because we don't check our sources. We don't know whether something is fact or fiction or disinformation, malinformation. And so we have to recognize or learn high levels of media literacy. And I give lots and lots and lots and lots of sources for any reader to be able to turn to so they can be empowered on this one level. So if we go to the next one, this is a 3rd one. We are observing this in real time under our noses as we speak. Authoritarian regimes exploit or amplify emergencies. So they create emergencies or crises, and they amplify them to create a national security panic, and that justifies this rapid expansion of executive power. So they grab power by saying, just temporarily, I need to have all of the power. We're going to forget about checks and balances, forget about Congress. I'm going to start a war because it is a crisis. We're watching this right now, and I give many examples of other countries where this also happens. What is the action plan? There are places where we can go where we can follow active emergencies. You can call your rep, you can ask about their stance on the Insurrection Act, for instance, and I educate the average reader about what that even means. I had to educate myself. I'm not a poli-sci guru. I had to learn myself, and because I've learned it and I have gone through that process, I'm able to assist others, the average reader, in knowing that as well. So the 3rd hallmark that I include, and this is very much on my mind. In fact, it's the reason why I wrote this book under a delusional timeline, because when I got the request to write it, I knew that it had to be in readers' hands well before the November midterms. Not that the November midterms are going to answer or resolve everything, but because I knew that it is a referendum on democracy, and that's just weeks away from us now. So I went into a writing bunker, happened to be in Boston for a couple of months, and I essentially just hooked myself up to a Dr. Pepper IV, lived off of crackers, and wrote this book around the clock. This is what happens, and we have seen it in virtually every democracy that has collapsed into autocracy. Autocrats rig elections. They do it by rejecting outcomes, they gerrymander, they intimidate voters, maybe they use something called the SAVE Act. I don't need to go into detail on that. The act of voting, according to John Lewis and according to many of the civil rights activists or the leaders, the great figures, it is a sacred act, and it's part of a covenant of care that we sign up for as citizens. So what is our action plan? I go into detail about how they can become poll watchers and how they can get registered themselves, how they have to make sure they can vote by mail wherever they might be. So I go into great detail in illustrating in case studies how this is a way that democracy falls and how we can prevent that from happening by being engaged on the ground in our neighborhood, in our zip code, helping others, and doing it with others who need support and giving support. So that's a big chunk of the book. Let's go to the next slide, can we?
Yeah, so now we know the what, like the red flags that we can see again, past, and we see it happening in real time, which is scary. But there's hope, right, Melissa? There's hope. So how can we as everyday citizens, how can we help save democracy?
I go deep into the studies of nonviolent resistance. I'm a personal fan of Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Gene Sharp, many great figures who have shown us, Mahatma Gandhi, who've shown us that nonviolent resistance actually works, but it is not what many people think it is. It is not capitulation. It is not surrender. It is actually very challenging. It requires great moral muscularity and communal, creative, committed movement. It requires action. And so if we go to the next slide, it gives a little bit of an overview of how I map this out because I created something called the ladder of nonviolence, and it goes rung by rung by rung by rung to the top of this wall of authoritarianism that you're trying to climb. And there is a synergistic, or at least an isometric relationship between that ladder that pushes against this wall. And the wonderful thing about a ladder, all of these rungs, is that you can scale them together or en masse. You can follow those that have climbed the rungs ahead of you. You can bring people up behind you, and all of the rungs are essential, and they all demand our physical engagement. So the bottom rung is really stuffed into the grassroots, literally and metaphorically. It's civic engagement, it's voting, it's organizing, it's all of the stuff that I've just described for them in these 11 authoritarian hallmarks. If you jump to rung 4, economic pressure, it's boycotting, et cetera, et cetera. And then I move after describing, and I hope detailing efficiently and effectively for my readers about nonviolent resistance, that hope is not the same thing as optimism, because optimism alone is just effervescence or carbonation. Hope, on the other hand, and I devote an entire closing chapter on that, it is not carbonation, it is carbon. It is the compressed, deep, heavy anchor. It is the bedrock. It is a discipline. It requires effort. And I draw from wonderful examples of people, including Martin Luther King Jr., others that I could mention here, but we don't have time, who embody for me, and I hope for my readers, how hopeful, determined, gritty involvement is a way to climb or scale the mountain of despair onto the stone of hope. So hope is not flimsy optimism, it is persistent moral imagination. And hope is the last thing I hope that I leave my readers with, that they are encouraged, that they know that it is weighty, that this is a struggle, that this is a historic juncture that we are all standing in at this time. And it requires all of us doing whatever we can. So I don't only educate, but I motivate and I activate in this book, hoping that when people get to the end of the book, they'll also appreciate the 40 pages of bibliography. Thank you very much. with the smallest print that's readable, that's legible to man, because it is weighty in that way, but it's accessible for every reader.
Thank you, Melissa. And I think this is the perfect quote to end on. Can you imagine if Dr. Martin Luther King said, I'm only one person, what can I possibly do? Each of us, as your book explains, and guides readers into how to take action so they can make a difference and be a part of the change in saving democracy. So fantastic. Thank you again for your insights, Melissa.
Thank you,
And for
Erica.
those of you that are ready to order, we've made it super easy for you. You can either scan this barcode right here, which will take you to the Edelweiss listing of how to save democracy, or you can speak to your Abrams rep. Familius is distributed by Abrams, and books are also available on Ingram. So go to Edelweiss, place your order with your rep, save it as a favorite so that it's on your shelves by pub date on September 15th. And if there are any questions, you're welcome to pop them into the chat. Questions for Melissa. I am not the one to answer them unless it's about ordering. But Melissa,
Well, I'm going to be the bad guy here and say if we want to put questions in the chat, let's go for it. But we do have to move on.
that is totally
So,
fine.
Melissa, thank you so much. That was really a tremendous presentation, and you'll
Thank
see
you.
there's a comment in the chat from Kelly, which is really powerful. So, thank you for that, Kelly. Okay, we keep pushing on. The time is relentless. Um, I'm introducing you Sonia Bohannon and Chloe Wirtz of Augsburg Fortress Press. They will be in discussion with two of their authors, from one on the adult side and one on the children's side. And I am going to get out of the way and fire up their PowerPoint and let them go.
I'm having some slight internet trouble, so my colleague Chloe is here with me. So Chloe, I might have you also jump in a second if I disappear, if you heard me say that, okay?
Yep.
But we are thrilled to be here. My name is Sonia Bohannon. I'm the Executive Director of Marketing and Sales at Augsburg Fortress Publishers. I'm joined by Chloe Wirtz, who's our publicity manager. Such a great conversation, so thank you to everyone participating, and we're thrilled to be here. Before you hear from our authors, I wanted to take a quick minute to introduce our imprints for those of you who might not be familiar with us. At Augsburg Fortress Publishers, we like to say that we love books that change the world, and our independent booksellers and librarian partners because we know you feel the same way. We publish voices that foster a more open, just, and compassionate world. Broadleaf, which is our adult nonfiction imprint. So I loved seeing the love for in the chat earlier, and timely reflection on what it is to live with meaning and connection. Our books range from personal stories of inspiration to journalistic explorations of topics that affect our culture. And this breadth is shown in some of our recent bestsellers that you might recognize, such as Matt Taylor's The Violent Take It by Force, Patty Krawick's Becoming Kin, and Ethan Tapper's How to Love a Forest. And then we're also representing Beaming today, our children's picture book imprint. And at Beaming Books, we help kids thrive in every part of who they are, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. The topics there range from self-esteem and kindness to ethics. And our books are designed to spark the imagination and equip kids and families to live full and flourishing lives. You may be familiar with our best-selling The Boy with Big, Big Feelings, and last year's very, very popular The Ghost Who is Afraid of Everything. Chloe is Thank you, Chloe.
Thanks, Sonia. I hope you guys could hear her. But I'm Chloe Wirtz. I'm the publicity manager for Broadleaf Books. And today I have the pleasure of introducing Darren Johnson. He is the author of Digital Coup, The Conspiracy to Thwart Global Democracy, which was published by Broadleaf Books this May. Darren has served in the Pentagon, the State Department, and the White House. He is a graduate of Yale and Harvard Law School, and today he is a professor of law at Howard University, where he focuses on international law, national security, foreign affairs, and human rights. Darren brings an extraordinary depth of experience to the work in his first book, and it reflects years of firsthand insight into how power, policy, and information intersect on a global stage. In Digital Coup, Darren takes us inside what he calls the digital battleground, a landscape where tech platforms don't just host information, but often amplify outrage, monetize division, and create opportunities for bad actors to spread misinformation at scale. The book challenges the idea of a neutral internet and instead reveals how deeply these systems are shaping political realities around the world. Recently, Darren gave a really amazing talk at ALA in Chicago, and that talk was titled How Tech Platforms Are Exploited to Inflame Political Anxieties. And if you missed it, you're going to get a small taste of that talk in today's webinar. So to kick us off, Darren, I'm going to pose this question. Digital technology was once used as a means for connection, but now it's also being used as a tool for driving misinformation and deepening an already divided country and world. Can you explain to us how we got here?
Thank you so much for that introduction and the question, Chloe. And thank you also to Shelf Awareness for hosting this webinar. So it's a great question. How did we get here? So like much of the world, I first was exposed to this issue, the broader issue of digital intervention in political elections, just like everyone else in 2016, largely with the Robert Mueller investigation that flowed from the attack on the US presidential election in 2016. And so I can remember the exact moment that my imagination was captured by this issue. I was headed to a radio interview to discuss the recently released Mueller indictments, which preceded the Mueller report by about a year. And as I was reading through the indictments, I froze. And I froze because what was made clear in those indictments is that the Russian government and various intelligence agents had sought to weaponize America's history of racial division, of social fissures, and they sought to weaponize those divisions against us in order to undermine our democracy. And in that moment, when I realized that our vulnerabilities had become part of this concerted attack, I decided that I wanted to explore this topic. And I have been exploring this topic through my scholarship for the last decade. And so that decade of research has led to the book Digital Coup. And in the book Digital Coup, I define a digital coup as an attempt to undermine democracy by digital means. And what the book Digital Coup does is it explains exactly what you asked, Chloe. How did we get here? What led to this point at which social media technology, which offered so much promise for democracy and which was foundational to many of the democratic uprisings in the Arab Spring and the Persian Spring, how did that technology end up being a focal point of the undermining of democracy? And so the book walks us through that history. It takes us through the history of how these techniques were designed by Russia. But what it does is 10 years on, I make the case in the book that we are now in the digital coup era, where other authoritarians and bad actors have followed Russia's playbook. And in the book, I make the case that these digital coup attempts are now a feature of elections and not an aberration, a feature of global elections. And so I build the case for that. I talk about the elections that have occurred in the last decade and in particular in recent years. I also make the case that we are now in a global digital coup economy where companies and individuals sell their services and technologies to the highest bidder to engage in these digital disinformation attacks that undermine democracy. And then I also make the case that this digital coup economy has also become a job for many individuals. So it's no longer just intelligence agents carrying out these campaigns. It's your influencer next door. It's the troll farm that has been built, troll farms that are built throughout Southeast Asia, where in that disinformation that undermines democracy globally. And then finally, I talk in the book about generative AI, right? And the fact that generative AI today has made this problem exponentially worse. We now have private companies that are using generative AI to pump out disinformation on an exponential scale, such that now we not only have to worry about interacting with human agents and bots through disinformation, we actually have to question whether we are interacting with a human at all. When you have generative AI that mimics human behavior and human actions. So I explore all of those topics in the book. And I also, in the book, after going through all the history and the challenges to democracy, I also seek to offer some. So I talk about some bright spots. I talk about what's being done by governments, by entities such as the European Union, by some governments such as in Ukraine and Taiwan that understand the scope of the problem because they've been under unrelenting attack for a long time. I discuss what's being done there, and I offer some recommendations for how we can move forward in this new digital coup era. The goal of the book is to educate the global public about this challenge, but the goal of the book is also ultimately to protect democracy by offering a roadmap to how we can address this rising problem in the digital coup era. Thank you, Chloe.
Thank you so much, Darren. Because Sonia's having some technical difficulties, I'm going to introduce our next author. So we're not supposed to have favorite books, but it's really hard for us as an imprint to pretend that My America Blooms isn't a favorite among staff. So I'm really honored to introduce Naz Aganj Ford. In My America Blooms, she shares the challenges and hopes of moving to a new country, accompanied by absolutely beautiful illustrations. When we acquired My America Blooms, we knew the story of an immigrant family would be relevant to families today, but we had no idea just how timely this story of Iranian immigrants would be at this moment in our history. Naz, will you share with us your personal story of immigration influenced by My America Blooms?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Chloe, and thank you, Sonia, if you can hear me. Also, thank you to Shelf Awareness and my fellow panelists. This has been a great conversation, so I'm just honored to be a part of it. To answer your question, yes, My America Blooms was inspired by my family's journey to America from Iran when I was young. We left a few years after the Islamic Revolution in the middle of the Iran-Iraq War. And it was a time of uncertainty and upheaval. And as an adult, I appreciate the sacrifices and risks that my family took. My parents left everybody they loved, practically, and there was no guarantee that things would work out. But as a child, what I experienced was the fear and the worries, and but also the thrills and the newness of everything. And I wanted to capture all of that in this story.
Thank you, Naz. So next question, what do you hope children and the communities interacting with children will learn from reading My America Blooms? And Matt, could you move to the next two slides, please?
So I wrote My America Blooms for kids like me who had to leave everything they knew and start over. I wanted them to feel that they were not alone and that there's a whole community of us. But I also, in many ways, wrote My America Blooms for the children, the people those children encounter, the classmates, their teachers, their neighbors. I wanted to offer a little bit of a perspective to those people as to what somebody might be going through. But also, I want to pay tribute to all the wonderful kindnesses that made my family feel welcome and share how impactful those small gestures could be. Recently, I actually did a story time, and a dad approached me afterward, and he shared that I've moved around a lot in my life, and I've had to start over a lot, so I could really relate to that. But I've never had to do anything like what happened to the family in this story. So I'm really grateful that you shared that. And I was so appreciative that he shared his story with me because it showed that universal aspect of starting over and being new can serve as a bridge to gaining that additional perspective of what somebody else might be going through. I also had a conversation with a principal of an elementary school that she described as having a high immigrant population. And in that conversation, she shared that she was getting the book. I was personalizing it for her. She was getting the book to share at her monthly story times with her students. But she also planned on recommending the book to her teachers who had just recently started a picture book club for grown-ups, which I loved because I personally believe that picture books are for everyone. But I also love the fact that in her example, she was showing that she was sharing the book with that primary audience of kids who, like me, had to start over, but also with that community of people who touches those kids every day. When I wrote My America Blooms, as Chloe shared, picture books take a little while to come out into the world. At that time, I was sharing a message of hope and community, which I felt like was timeless. And I love Melissa's definition of hope, that it's something that takes effort. It's not just this optimism. It really is that kind of cultivation of a moral, I believe she called it persistent moral imagination. But when the book released, sadly and heartbreakingly, I saw that it was really as necessary now as it might have been for me when I was a child, with everything going on from ICE to the war with Iran. I'm sad, but I'm also proud that this message is meeting this moment and giving us hopefully a path that we can all embrace.
Great. Thank you, Naz. So if you're interested in carrying our books, we're self-distributed, so you can order directly from us, or we're available from all major distributors. And Sonia dropped our trade newsletter in the chat, and we'd love for you to sign up for it if you're interested in these titles or other from Broadleaf and Beaming Books. Thank you.
Thank you. What a bunch of professional presenters that we came in right on time. I want to say thank you to our authors, Melissa, Darren, Naz, our presenters from each of the publishers, and especially to Kelly and Catherine, who took time out of their day to really bring some powerful words to us. This is an ongoing series. You will receive invitations to future webinars, but shoot us a note at webinars@shelf-awareness.com if you have any comments or requests. We did record this session and we will send it along to everyone. And if you're a librarian and this matters to you, we will also send along a certificate of completion for professional development. And with that, I will say thank you. And that's the end of our session. I'm going to ask our panelists to stay on. Jess, you can stop the recording.